If someone told me I'd get a text from my dead mother's number, I would have laughed. But that night, when her message flashed across my screen, "I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery now," my blood froze. What followed shattered everything I thought I knew about my family, my father, and even death itself. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. Hit like, subscribe, and stick around as I reveal the chilling truth that still keeps me awake at night. My name is Jonathan Joseph, and I'm 32 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, where the sky always seems a little gray, and the coffee's the only thing keeping people alive some mornings. I've built my career around logic, software engineering, code, and structure. But life has a way of laughing at logic, especially when it comes to family. Growing up, my world revolved around two people: my mother, Margaret Joseph, and my father, Henry Joseph. Mom was the sun, warm, gentle, patient. She taught high school English and always had a book in her hands. She smelled like lavender and always found time to listen. My father was the storm, cold, calculating, distant. He was a real estate mogul, more at home in his office than in our living room. I used to think their differences balanced each other out, but as I got older, I saw the cracks widening between them. I remember one night when I was 12. Mom was in the kitchen, rolling out cookie dough while humming Fleetwood Mac's Landslide. Dad walked in, talking on his phone, irritated about a business dinner. When she asked if he'd be home late, he said, "Don't wait up," kissed her cheek, and left. It wasn't until years later that I realized those business dinners were spent with women who weren't my mother. Still, she stayed. Maybe out of love, maybe because of me. When she got sick, stage 4 cancer, she faced it with quiet dignity. She didn't complain. She didn't cry in front of me. But I saw her fade, day by day, until even her smile seemed borrowed from another lifetime. I spent every evening in that hospice room, watching her chest rise and fall, holding her hand while reading her favorite book, To Kill a Mockingbird. My father visited twice. Both times, he stayed less than an hour, leaving early for meetings. When she finally passed, I was there. Her hand was warm one second, cold the next. She whispered, "I love you, Johnny," and then she was gone. I thought the worst moment of my life was losing her. I was wrong. The funeral was held on a gray, rainy Friday. The church pews were filled with neighbors, friends, and former students, people she had touched with her kindness. I stood at the front, staring at the wooden casket that held the woman who'd raised me, and all I could think was how empty the front row looked. My father wasn't there. I told myself he'd arrive late, maybe caught in traffic, maybe just avoiding the crowd. But as the priest began to speak, I knew. The whispers started in the pews. "He didn't even show up? He's with that woman, isn't he?" My cousin handed me her phone. "John," she whispered, "you need to see this." It was a photo from social media. My father and Vanessa Cole, his mistress, smiling as they boarded a private plane to Hawaii. The caption read, "Finally, some peace. Peace. On the day we buried my mother." The words sliced through me. I wanted to throw the phone, scream, anything. Instead, I stood there, numb, as the rain fell harder, drumming against the stained glass. After the ceremony, I went home to our old house. Mom's perfume still lingered in the hallway. I sat on her bed, surrounded by the books she loved, and let the grief crush me. Her phone was still on the nightstand, powered off since the hospital. I picked it up, staring at the black screen, remembering how she used to text me. "Lunch yet? Don't skip meals." That night, I left a voicemail for my father. My voice shook with anger. "Dad, Mom deserved better. She deserved you at her funeral, at least. You're a disgrace." I hung up and sat in silence. The house creaked, as if mourning with me. I could still smell her perfume, faint and comforting, even as my chest ached. I cried until my vision blurred, until exhaustion finally dragged me into a restless sleep on her side of the bed. I didn't know that when I woke up, everything I believed about death and my mother was about to be destroyed. It was 1:47 in the morning when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. The sound was sharp against the stillness of the room, pulling me out of a dream I couldn't quite remember. At first, I thought it was just a late notification or maybe a wrong number. But when I looked at the screen, my heart stopped. MOM. Her name flashed there, glowing faintly against the darkness, just as it always had when she texted me about dinner or asked how my day was. But she was gone. She'd been buried less than 12 hours ago. The message said, "Jonathan, I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery. Now." For a moment, my body locked up. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at the screen, blinking hard, waiting for the letters to rearrange themselves into something logical, something normal. But they didn't. The words stayed the same. I whispered out loud, my voice trembling. "This isn't real." The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I felt my skin prickle as a cold shiver ran down my spine. I turned my head toward the nightstand. My mother's phone was still there, the same one she had used before she passed. It was off, dead, covered in dust from sitting untouched for weeks. I grabbed it, fumbling with the charger. The screen flickered for a second before showing the empty battery symbol. Dead. There was no way it could have sent anything. I stared back at my phone, hoping the message would disappear. Instead, the typing dots appeared. I felt my pulse hammer in my throat. Then another message came. "Hurry, before he comes back." That was when every part of me screamed to leave it alone. Logic told me this was some sick joke, a scam, or maybe a hack. But the way those words were phrased, it sounded like her. The tone, the urgency. I typed back with shaking hands. "Who is this? This isn't funny." No reply. I waited a minute, then another. Still nothing. My stomach twisted. My chest felt tight. I stood up, pacing the room. The air felt heavier, almost electric. "It's just a coincidence," I told myself. "Someone got her number. That's all." But then I remembered something. My mom's last few weeks in the hospice. She'd once said, "If something happens to me, don't trust everything you see." I'd brushed it off as morphine-induced confusion. But now, the words echoed like thunder in my head. I sat down, rubbing my face. Maybe I should call the police. But what would I even say? "Hi, my dead mom just texted me. Can you come check the cemetery?" They'd think I'd lost my mind. I opened her contact again. Same photo, her smiling in the backyard, sunlight hitting her hair. I hesitated for a second, then decided to check the message details. It was her exact number. The same SIM. Then came the faintest sound from the hallway. I froze. It was soft, like a footstep on the old wooden floorboards. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a small lamp, and stepped toward the door. "Hello." My voice barely came out. Nothing. Just silence. I turned on the light in the hall. Empty. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, every second stretching too long. I was alone. Completely alone. But when I came back into the bedroom, the phone buzzed again. Another message. "Jonathan, please, come to Maplewood Cemetery. I'll explain everything." My throat went dry. Maplewood Cemetery was where she was buried. At that point, rational thought was gone. Maybe it was grief, maybe it was hope. But something deep inside me whispered that I needed to go. I didn't even change out of my hoodie and jeans. I grabbed my car keys, threw on my jacket, and ran out the door. Outside, the night air was cold and heavy with fog. My breath came out in small white clouds as I unlocked my car. The streets were empty, the world asleep. The glow of the dashboard clock showed 2:07 a.m. As I drove, the headlights cut through the mist, illuminating wet asphalt and skeletal trees. My mind raced the entire time. What if this was someone dangerous? What if it was my dad's doing, another cruel twist to mess with me? Or worse, what if it was real? When I finally turned onto the narrow road leading to Maplewood Cemetery, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. The iron gates loomed ahead, slightly open, creaking in the wind. I parked near the entrance, my car's headlights throwing long shadows between the headstones. The world felt wrong. Silent. The fog was thick enough to taste. I pulled my jacket tight and stepped inside. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under my boots and the faint whistle of wind through the trees. My heart pounded with every step as I made my way to my mother's grave. And that's when I saw it. The bouquet of sunflowers I'd left at her grave earlier that day was gone. The soil looked disturbed, as if someone had dug there recently. Then, in the distance, faintly, came a sound I knew by heart. A ringtone. My mother's ringtone. The drive to the cemetery felt longer than it should have. The rain had stopped, but the fog still hung low, swirling around my headlights like ghostly fingers. The wipers squeaked rhythmically against the windshield, and my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Every rational thought told me to turn around, to call someone, to not go alone. But something stronger, curiosity, fear, maybe love, kept my foot pressing the gas pedal. The cemetery sat at the edge of town, surrounded by tall, ancient oaks whose twisted branches seemed to guard the graves. When I pulled up, the iron gates were open, creaking slightly as if they had been moved recently. My mom's grave was near the back, under a willow tree. I had chosen that spot myself, thinking she'd like the shade and the soft whisper of leaves above her. But as I parked and stepped out of the car, the air shifted. The world was silent, too silent. Not a single cricket, not even the sound of distant traffic. Just that heavy, suffocating quiet. My flashlight beam cut through the fog as I made my way down the gravel path, crunching softly under my shoes. When I reached the row where Mom was buried, I froze. Her grave looked different. The flowers I had placed there were gone, replaced by a single black rose tied with a red ribbon. The dirt looked freshly disturbed, as if someone had been digging. My stomach twisted. "Mom," I whispered, half hoping it was a sick joke, half terrified I'd hear an answer. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. Same number. "I see you." I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the flashlight. The beam darted through the fog, but there was no one. My breath came out in sharp gasps as I turned in circles, searching for any sign of movement. Then I saw it. A shadow. Just beyond the graves, near the old crypt by the hill, a tall silhouette stood still, watching me. My chest tightened, and I forced myself to step forward. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice cracking. No reply, just the sound of the fog shifting. I took another step, and another. The figure began to move, slowly, backward, as if leading me toward the crypt. I hesitated but followed anyway, drawn by something I couldn't explain. Every few feet, I looked down at my phone, half expecting another text. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely keep hold of it. When I reached the crypt, the figure was gone. I scanned the area, but all I saw was the heavy stone door, slightly open. A faint light flickered inside, like the glow of a candle. Against every instinct screaming, "Don't do this," I pushed the door open and stepped in. The air was cold and damp, and the smell of old earth and decay filled my lungs. The candlelight came from the far corner, where a shape was kneeling, motionless. "Mom," I whispered again. The shape moved. Slowly, it turned its head toward me. I saw a face. Pale, bruised, eyes sunken but unmistakable. It was her. My mother. For a moment, the world stopped. My flashlight flickered, my knees nearly gave out. "No, no, you're dead," I stammered. She smiled weakly. "Jonathan," her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper, but real. "Help me." I stumbled forward, my mind spiraling. "This isn't possible. I saw you. I buried you." She reached out a trembling hand. "They buried me alive." My blood ran cold. My vision blurred as everything I thought I knew shattered in an instant. I fell to my knees beside her, my hands shaking as I touched her arm, warm, alive. Tears filled my eyes. How are you here? What happened?" Before she could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind me. Heavy, deliberate. Someone was coming. My mother's expression changed from relief to pure terror. "Hide," she hissed. The candle went out. Darkness swallowed us whole. And in that suffocating blackness, a familiar voice echoed from the doorway, low, calm, and chilling. "Jonathan," my father said. "What are you doing here?" "Dad?" My voice trembled as I turned toward the entrance of the crypt. The faint moonlight behind him cast his face in shadow, but I could still make out that familiar expression of cold control, the same one he used whenever I asked questions he didn't want to answer. He stepped inside slowly, his shoes crunching on the dirt floor. The scent of his cologne, sharp, woody, expensive, clashed with the musty air of the crypt. "You shouldn't be here, son," he said softly, almost kindly. "It's dangerous." "Dangerous?" I repeated, my mind spinning. "Dad, Mom's here. She's alive." For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, shock, maybe even guilt, but then he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a father. It was something darker. "You shouldn't believe everything you see in the dark, Jonathan." I raised my flashlight, the beam shaking as I tried to find Mom again. But she was gone. The spot where she had been kneeling was empty, only the flickering candle rolling on its side. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. "She was right here," I shouted, backing away from him. "I talked to her." Dad tilted his head. "You've been through a lot lately. Losing your mother, that can make you see things. Hear things." Grief does strange things to people. Don't do that, I snapped. Don't make me think I'm crazy. He took another step toward me, his voice low, persuasive. You've always had a vivid imagination, Jonathan. Remember when you thought someone was watching you from your closet? You were 7, and your mother and I. Stop it, I interrupted, my voice breaking. This isn't about when I was a kid. This is real. Why are you here, Dad? Why come to the cemetery at midnight? He sighed, brushing dirt off his tailored sleeve. I came to make sure everything was properly taken care of. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. I took another step back. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the crypt wall, at something behind me. I turned and froze. There, half hidden in the shadows, was a small door built into the stone, one I hadn't noticed before. A chain hung loosely from the latch, recently broken. A faint sound came from the other side. Not movement exactly, more like breathing. Dad? I said slowly, what's behind that door? His silence told me everything. I stepped closer, my fingers trembling as I touched the cold metal handle. You can't open that, he said sharply, his voice rising for the first time. But I did. The door creaked open, and a narrow stairway descended into the darkness. A single light bulb flickered at the bottom. The air that came out was damp, foul, and metallic, like rust and rot mixed together. My father's voice turned urgent. Jonathan, don't go down there. But I couldn't stop. My legs moved on their own, each step echoing through the stone chamber. I could hear him following behind me, his footsteps faster now, echoing louder. When I reached the bottom, I saw a small underground room lined with old wooden boxes. At first, I thought they were storage crates. But then my eyes adjusted, and I realized they were coffins. Each one had a name carved crudely into the wood. Some names I didn't recognize. But one stopped me cold. Margaret Hale. My mother's name. The lid was half open. Inside was a woman's body, pale, lifeless, but not decomposed. Her hands were folded neatly across her chest, a rosary between her fingers. And yet, her eyes were open. I staggered backward, while rising in my throat. Dad, what is this? He was standing at the bottom of the stairs now, his face shadowed, his eyes calm. You weren't supposed to find this, he said quietly. You weren't supposed to come here at all. Who are these people? I demanded, my voice trembling. What did you do? He looked around, as if admiring his own work. These are the ones who got too close. Who asked too many questions. Your mother was supposed to be the last. No, I whispered. You buried her alive. She told me. He smiled faintly. I didn't bury her. I paid someone else to do it. But she wasn't supposed to survive. The world spun. I felt sick. My own father, this man who had raised me, who had taught me how to ride a bike, who told me every night that family was everything, was a murderer. I stumbled toward the stairs, but he moved faster, grabbing my arm in an iron grip. You can't tell anyone, Jonathan, he hissed. Do you understand what would happen to me? To you? I don't care. I shouted, wrenching free. You killed her. He grabbed me again, this time harder, shoving me back against the wall. The impact made my head spin. I didn't kill her, he snarled. She killed me. Everything I built, my company, my reputation, she wanted to destroy it. She was going to expose everything. Expose what? I gasped. He leaned close, his eyes wild now. You'll see soon enough. She started something she couldn't finish. And then, just as he raised his hand to strike me, another voice filled the chamber. Joseph. It was my mother's voice. Calm, cold, unmistakable. My father froze. Slowly, we both turned toward the doorway. And there she was, standing at the bottom of the stairs, alive, pale, her eyes filled with something between fury and sorrow. Hello, darling, she said. Miss me? My father took a step back, his composure cracking for the first time. You're not real. Oh, I'm very real, she said softly. You should have made sure I stayed buried. I stood there, torn between horror and disbelief, as the two of them faced each other in that cold underground tomb, husband and wife, murderer and survivor. Then she looked at me. Jonathan, she whispered, get out. Now. But I didn't move. Because deep down, I knew that whatever was about to happen next would change everything forever. For a moment, everything was silent except the faint hum of the single light bulb swaying above us. Dust drifted in the air like falling snow. My father stood rigid, his face pale, while my mother's shadow stretched long and thin across the crypt floor. "Margaret," Dad's voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." She smiled, a bitter, haunted smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Neither should you, Joseph. But here we are." I was frozen between them, heart pounding so hard it hurt. "Mom, how are you alive?" She didn't look at me right away. Instead, she kept her eyes on my father. "He thought he could silence me, Jonathan. Just like the others." "The others?" I whispered. "What others?" Dad turned to me sharply. "Don't listen to her. She's confused. She's telling the truth." Mom cut in, her voice slicing through the air. "You killed them, Joseph. All of them. Business partners, employees, anyone who threatened to expose what you did." "Stop it," he barked, stepping forward. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about." She moved closer, her face inches from his now. "You stole money from your company's investors. You laundered it through offshore accounts. When your partner found out, he disappeared. Then it was your secretary, then your accountant. And when I found your files and said I was going to the police." She turned her eyes to me, so full of grief I could barely breathe. "He drugged me." I felt my knees weaken. "Dad," I whispered, but he didn't deny it. He just looked away. "He injected me." Mom continued, voice trembling but steady. "I woke up in a coffin. Buried. I don't know how long I screamed before someone heard me. The caretaker found me 2 days later when he came to clean the cemetery. He called the police, but by then," she looked down. "By then, Joseph had already filed the death certificate and cremation notice. Everything was official. I was dead." My stomach turned. Jesus Christ. Mom took a deep breath. "I couldn't go to the police right away. I was too weak. I needed proof. So I hid. I watched. I waited. And tonight," her eyes flicked toward me, "I texted you, Jonathan, because I knew he'd come looking for you once he realized I wasn't in that coffin." Dad finally spoke, his voice low and venomous. "You shouldn't have come back, Margaret. You don't know what you're dealing with." She laughed bitterly. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. The man who murdered his own wife." His face twisted, anger boiling to the surface. "You ruined me. Everything I built, everything I worked for. You wanted to destroy it because of your moral crusade. Because it was built on blood," she shouted. "You think money makes it right? You think power erases guilt." I stepped between them, raising my hands. "Stop, both of you." They froze, glaring at each other over my shoulder. I turned to my father. "Is it true, Dad? Did you really kill people?" He met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before: fear. "Jonathan," he said quietly, "everything I did for us. For the family. For you." "No," I said. "You did it for yourself." His expression hardened again. "You don't understand. You've never understood what it takes to survive in this world. Your mother lived in some fantasy where honesty mattered. But this is real life. And in real life, people like me win." Mom shook her head. "You didn't win, Joseph. You just delayed losing." I could see her trembling now, holding something behind her back. A small black recorder. She clicked a button, and my father's voice filled the air. "She's getting suspicious. If she talks, everything collapses. We can't let that happen. I'll take care of it tonight." My blood ran cold. The voice was unmistakable. Dad lunged forward, but I stepped in front of him, pushing him back. "You're done, Dad," I yelled. "It's over." He stared at me, breathing hard. "You'd choose her over me? After everything I've done for you?" I swallowed hard. "You didn't do it for me. You did it to feed your own ego." He laughed then, a strange, broken sound. "You think you can just walk away from this? You think anyone will believe you? I control the police, the lawyers, the money, everything." But Mom shook her head. "Not anymore." She raised her phone and pressed a button. "The file's already uploaded to 3 servers. If anything happens to me or Jonathan, the world will know what you did." Dad's smile faded. "You what?" Her voice was cold steel. "Checkmate." For the first time in my life, I saw fear truly break through my father's mask. He looked from her to me, his jaw tightening. "You have no idea what you've done," he said quietly. "No idea who you're dealing with." And then, without warning, he bolted up the stairs. "Dad," I shouted, running after him. Mom's voice echoed behind me. "Jonathan, don't. It's not safe." But I didn't stop. My instincts screamed to chase him, to end this nightmare once and for all. By the time I reached the cemetery gate, His car was already speeding away, gravel spraying under the tires. I could barely catch my breath, heart pounding, mind reeling. Mom reached me moments later, leaning heavily against a tombstone, her face pale and exhausted. "He won't stop," she said weakly. "He's going to try something else." I put an arm around her shoulders. "Then we'll be ready. I'll protect you." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "No, Jonathan. You need to protect yourself." "What do you mean?" She took a deep, shaky breath. "There's something else you don't know, something I never told you." Her voice trembled. "Joseph isn't just a criminal. He's part of something much bigger. The people he worked for, they won't let this go." My stomach dropped. "What people?" Before she could answer, the sound of tires screeching echoed from the road. Headlights flared in the darkness, 2 black SUVs pulling up fast. Mom's grip on my arm tightened. "Run, Jonathan. Now." But it was too late. The gates burst open, and men in dark suits stepped out, guns drawn, moving with deadly precision. Mom pushed me behind a monument, whispering fiercely, "Whatever happens, don't let them take the recorder." Bullets shattered the silence of the cemetery. I ducked behind the stone, clutching the recorder, heart hammering as shadows darted between graves. That night, I learned the truth about my father's sins. But it was only the beginning of the nightmare. Gunfire ripped through the air, echoing off the marble tombs. The cemetery, silent only seconds before, erupted into chaos. I could hear bullets whizzing past my head, striking stone, tearing into earth. My pulse pounded so violently it drowned out every other sound. "Stay down," Mom hissed, pulling me closer behind the monument. Her hands were trembling, but her eyes, those calm, determined eyes, never wavered. "Who are they?" I shouted over the gunfire. She shook her head. "They work for your father. Or rather, for the people behind him. He's just their puppet now. We need to move now." She grabbed my arm and started crawling along the ground. The moonlight made everything a pale blue blur. Gravestones, statues, crosses, all melting together in a maze of shadows. A bullet struck the stone beside my head, shattering it into dust. I gasped. Mom pulled me down. "Jonathan," she whispered sharply. "The mausoleum. To the left, go." I didn't think. I ran. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but adrenaline pushed me forward. We dove inside the small stone structure just as another volley of shots lit up the night. Inside, it was pitch black except for the faint beam of my phone flashlight. The walls were lined with old plaques, names long forgotten. The air was suffocating. Mom pressed her back against the door, breathing hard. "We can't stay here long. They'll search every inch." I pulled out the recorder, my hands shaking. "We still have this. The proof. We can go to the cops." She gave a hollow laugh. "The police? Joseph owns half the department, Jonathan. If we go to them, they'll hand us straight to him." "Then what do we do?" She looked at me, her face pale but resolute. "We disappear." Before I could respond, we heard footsteps outside, the crunch of boots on gravel. A voice called out, cold and professional. "Search every crypt. She's not far." Mom motioned for silence. We crouched low, barely breathing. The door creaked slightly with every gust of wind, and each sound made my heart lurch. "Mom," I whispered, "if they find us." "They won't," she interrupted firmly. "Not if we move now." She pointed toward a narrow vent at the back of the mausoleum. It was small, but maybe just big enough to squeeze through. "You go first," she whispered. I hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you." "Go." I crawled toward the vent, pushing aside cobwebs and debris. My shoulders barely fit through the opening, but I forced myself forward until I felt the cold night air on my face again. I rolled out into a patch of tall grass behind the crypt. Then I turned and froze. Mom was still inside. I could see her through the narrow slit, crouched low. Suddenly, the door burst open. Flashlights and shouting filled the air. "Run, Jonathan," she screamed. "No," I shouted, reaching back for her, but a hand grabbed her hair and yanked her out of sight. The last thing I saw was the look in her eyes, fierce and pleading. "Go." I ran. Branches tore at my face as I sprinted toward the trees that lined the edge of the cemetery. The world blurred into streaks of black and gray. Behind me, I heard engines start, men shouting. I dove into the woods, tripping over roots, gasping for air. The night was alive with the sounds of pursuit, footsteps, barking orders, flashlights sweeping through the darkness. I didn't stop running until my legs gave out. I collapsed against a fallen log, chest heaving, blood pounding in my ears. Mom was gone, but I still had the recorder clutched in my hand. The one thing she told me not to lose. I sat there in the dark for what felt like hours, trying to steady my breathing, trying not to fall apart. Every sound made me flinch, the rustle of leaves, the crack of a branch. Finally, I pulled out my phone. No service. Of course, I was too far from the road. I knew I had to get out of there. I couldn't go home. They'd find me. I couldn't go to the police. They were compromised. The only person I could think to call was my mom's old friend, Detective Robert Hayes, a retired cop who'd always been kind to our family. If anyone could help, it was him. I started moving again, staying low, keeping to the shadows. By the time I reached the old highway on the far side of the woods, dawn was breaking. The air was cold, and my clothes were soaked with dew. A truck slowed as it passed, the driver leaning out. "You okay, buddy?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just car trouble." He nodded, unconvinced, but didn't press. He offered me a ride into town, and I climbed into the passenger seat, clutching my mother's recorder like a lifeline. As we drove away, I glanced out the window and froze again. A black SUV was parked near the tree line, half hidden in the mist. Even from a distance, I could tell. They were still looking for me. When I finally reached town, I borrowed the driver's phone and called Hayes. His voice came through rough with sleep. "Jonathan? Kid, it's been years. What's wrong?" "Detective," I said, my voice shaking. "I need your help. It's my dad. He tried to kill my mom. And now they're after me." A pause. Then, quietly, "Where are you?" I gave him the name of a diner on Route 41. He told me to wait there. I hung up and sat down at a booth near the window, heart still racing. The waitress brought me coffee, but I couldn't drink it. My hands were trembling too hard. Half an hour later, Hayes walked in. He looked older, grayer, but the same steady presence. He spotted me instantly, slid into the booth across from me, and leaned forward. "Start from the beginning," he said. So I told him everything. About the funeral, the text, the cemetery, the truth about Dad. When I finished, he sat back, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "You're lucky to be alive, kid. If what you're saying is true, this goes way beyond your old man." I slid the recorder across the table. "It's all here." He picked it up, listened for a few seconds, and nodded grimly. "That's enough to blow the lid off something huge. But we need to be smart. These people, your dad's people, they'll burn down the world before they let this leak." He leaned in closer. "We go public, they'll come for both of us. But if we disappear long enough to get this into the right hands..." Before he could finish, the bell above the diner door rang. I looked up and saw a man in a black suit walk in. His eyes locked on mine. "Hayes," I whispered. "They found us." For weeks after my mother's reappearance, the world around me felt like it was spinning out of orbit. My father was in jail, his company under investigation, and the small town that once whispered about my family's wealth now gossiped about our disgrace. But for me, the chaos wasn't what hurt the most, it was the silence. Mom stayed in a safe house arranged by the authorities while they built a case against my father. When I finally visited her, she looked different, stronger, but also haunted. Her voice trembled when she said, "He didn't just cheat, Alex. He was part of something darker." When I found out, he said he'd rather bury the truth than face it. It turned out the mistress, Julia, had been blackmailing him. She wasn't just his lover. She was his business partner in illegal investments tied to offshore accounts. When my mom discovered the scheme, he panicked. They planned to make her disappearance look like a heart attack, then a burial, then move her out of the country. But Julia got greedy, threatening to expose him if he didn't transfer everything into her name. That night, the night I got the text, Julia had gone rogue. She texted me pretending to be Mom, trying to lure me to the cemetery to frame me or maybe finish what they started. But she didn't count on Mom showing up first. When police arrived, they found Julia's car nearby, packed with cash, a passport, and my father's ledger, evidence that would destroy him. He confessed after days of interrogation. His voice, on the recording I later heard, sounded small. I thought I could fix it. I thought I could control everything. But she always knew. My mother testified against him in court. She never once looked at him. When the verdict came, guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder, she held my hand tightly and whispered, it's over now. But was it really? Even after justice, the scars didn't fade. The house felt hollow, echoes of the past lingering in every corner. I'd wake at night and swear I could still hear the sound of dirt being shoveled, that awful sound from the cemetery, and my mother's faint whisper, "Alex, don't be afraid." We sold the mansion, moved to a smaller town where no one knew our name. Mom started volunteering at a crisis center, helping women who'd escaped abusive or manipulative partners. I went back to school, trying to rebuild some sense of normal. One night, months later, I found an old voicemail on my phone from my father, dated 2 days before Mom's funeral. His voice was eerily calm. "If something happens, know that I did it for the family. For control. For peace." Peace. That word made me sick. Because peace doesn't come from control, it comes from truth. And the truth had nearly buried us alive. Sometimes, I still visit the cemetery. Mom won't go near it, but I do. I stand by the empty grave, the one with her name still carved on the stone, and I feel the cold wind whisper through the trees. Every time, I remind myself, that grave isn't a reminder of death. It's proof of survival. Proof that lies can only stay buried for so long before they claw their way to the surface. And as strange as it sounds, that thought gives me hope. Because even when everything you know collapses, when betrayal rots everything you trusted, you can still crawl out of the dirt, wipe the lies from your eyes, and start again. What would you do if you got a text from someone you thought was dead? Would you go, or ignore it and move on? Tell me what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more chilling, emotional tales like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more real, dramatic stories to life every week. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the truth is buried deeper than any grave. Stay safe, take care of those you love, and I'll see you in the next story.